the waving motion of a worm, which resembles the waving of a field of flowers, which is very poetic, very poetic. It's almost sort of, the way things mean different things in Chinese. They have sort of multiple layered meanings with Chinese characters, which should give us a lot of respect for the Nahuatl civilization. But yeah, so I decided to look into this and see what I could find from documented sources this time. I'm not sure. And I found like a lot of conflicting information. So, yeah, it's also sort of, it's a correction / admission of defeat, but these are some things that I found.
Okay.
Okay. So, according to the University of Minnesota, its Latin name is Euphorbia pulcheria. So that has nothing to do with Poinsett, this old Poinsett guy who was bad. And I think that means the prettiest euphorbia, pulcheria.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which is a little mean to the other, it's like when you have a family and you're like, oh yeah, that's the pretty sister and that's the smart one. Not good.
Mhm.
I probably hurts all their feelings. But yeah, according to the Minnesota Landscape Arboretum article of 1120, on November 2023 by Sarah Jackson. Yeah, it's pronounced Quetla Shoshi or Shoshi. You sort of say the T, but you can't hear it that much. But yeah, it has to do with the word queetlatl or residue, which she thinks has to do with the white sap that it gives off. Other people have said that, the Newark Advocate in their 12/1/2022 article by Terry Gill thinks that it means flower that grows in residue or soil. And the Maya call it apparently the kalulwitz or ember flower, bright flower. According to urbanstems.com article from 12/8/2022, I believe, it's called brilliant flower. Only they associated that with the Nahuatl term. I think they just got that wrong. Like that's the Mayan term for it. According to ny1.com, got this from the Associated Press apparently on 12/20/2023. It's also known as the flower that withers, or that has something to do with the name, the actual name, Quetzalcoatl. So they also said it's associated with the goddesses Coatlicue, Tonantzin, and now the Virgin Mary, who's sort of become a stand-in for all of them. In Mexican religion, Coatlicue is a serpent goddess. She's a mother goddess and a serpent goddess. I don't know as much about Tonantzin, but she's something about the lady with the serpent petticoat, I believe her name means. And that has to do with waving, waving, slugs, waving, a lot of waving things here.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, that is, you may think you're tough, but are you wearing snakes for underwear? I think not. So yeah, it also goes by the name, according to the NY1, of the Federal Star in Argentina, I think, and the Inca flower in Peru. So a lot of people like this flower. The Christian explanation is that there's a couple legends. The Franciscan friars started using them for Christmas parades in Toxco. Toxco. I'm not sure how I pronounce that, but yeah. And then they miraculously turned red. I think they were actually red before that, but yeah. Also, and they're sometimes called the Flor de Nochebuena, the flower of the Holy Night.
Mm-hmm.
And there's also a legend about a peasant girl named Pepita, who wanted to give something to the Virgin Mary or the baby Jesus or something, and she went and picked a bunch of weeds from the side of the road and then put them on the altar, and they miraculously turned into Quetzalcoatl, which were very, very pretty. So yeah, according to hiplatina.com on 12/20/2021, article by Sofia Aguilar, they're also known as the mortal flower that withers and perishes like all that is pure. Sometimes their name is translated to that. So okie dokie. And they were put in temples for the war god's birthday, Huitzilopochtli. They're associated with warriors' blood, apparently. So, oh, and what's that very bad guy, also participated in the Trail of Tears. So, not a nice man. We should really stop saying his name. He deserves to be, well, not associated with pretty flowers.
I see. All right. Well, thank you, Rebecca.
You're welcome.
I'm not sure I'm any less confused though after that report. But
it lived up to its name, that segment. If
yeah.
anyone would want to call me with alternate theories, or even better yet, someone who actually studies Nahuatl. Actually, I was googling Nahuatl language experts near me earlier. We need help. I need help.
All right. Well, thanks.
You're welcome.
Okay, so on to ecological news. And of course, ecologically speaking, the big news on the planet right now is the COP30 conference, which the point I didn't make at the first part where I was talking about how terrible corruption is. One of the big reasons that it's so terrible right now is because we don't have time for corruption. You know, one of the main things that happens when you've got a corrupt system is everything gets slowed down because everybody has to take their cut, and you've got to get permission from this one and some bribes there, and permission from that one and bribes there. And we don't have time for that right now as a species, as a planet. We got to move. And the fact that this is COP30, this is the 30th conference of party sponsored by the UN to deal with the problem of global warming, and we're still not there yet. Just shows up the fact that we literally don't have time for this, folks. We got to get it on our game. Not a lot of positive news coming out of COP30 this year. There's a story in The Guardian on the 14th. Title was "Fossil Fuel Lobbyists Outnumber All COP30 Delegates Except Brazil," report says. In fact, there are 1,600 registered COP fossil fuel lobbyists at this conference, which is supposedly figuring out how we can get off of fossil fuels. And that's an underestimate because the embedded fossil fuel people in delegations aren't counted with that. Those are just the separate fossil fuel lobbyists. There was a big dramatic thing that happened this past week. Hundreds of indigenous people from the rainforest tried to penetrate the inner circle of the COP conference. The way these conferences are organized is they've got like blue zones and green zones and red zones, and they exile the non-government organizations. The environmental groups are in the outermost ring, and as you travel inwards, you get closer to the decision makers, and the decision makers are right there in that center section. And so the indigenous people tried to get in to where the actual decisions were being made, and they were stopped by security forces. There's a lot of dramatic pictures of indigenous people in full native regalia being thrown to the ground by guys in security outfits. Was not good. Not a good picture of them trying to get into the blue zone, as it's called. I've caught some of the press conferences, some of the events that have been streamed, and unfortunately, it's not hearing a lot of good stuff. They're talking about spending money on resiliency, which is a waste of money at this point because until you stop putting the carbon in the air, it doesn't matter how much you spend on resiliency. The disasters are going to overwhelm your defenses. They are talking about creating something called a Baku to Berlin, $1.3 trillion roadmap to carbon reduction, which is nice. And the U.S., thanks to our short-sighted President Trump, does not have a delegation at COP30. In his place, the governor of California, speaking of California, Gavin Newsom went, and he's making speeches and signing memorandums of understanding with lots of different countries to exchange technologies and infrastructure, learning how other countries are coping and making the switch to carbon free. So the U.S. is kind of represented, even though we're not officially represented. There are 193 other countries plus the EU there, so 194. And so things are happening, but again, it's too slow to save us. And part of the reason for that is, of course, corruption. So moving on to the next story. This is kind of good news. It's sort of a bittersweet news. The Navajo Times on November 10th, title is EPA begins cleanup of uranium mine waste in Lakachukai Mountains. And they're going to remove 13,000 cubic yards of uranium mining wastes. And the work actually started on November 5th. This will clean up 3 of the 300 or so mines. It's called the Mesa Mine. And this is a mine that sits above the Cove and Isal communities. And right now, people graze their livestock in that area. They do recreation hunting there. But these mine tailings, these radioactive mine tailings, are radioactive. And they've been causing, for about the past 70 years, they've been causing cancer rates and birth defects and all the horrible things that radiation causes. Now, the wastes, the mining wastes, are going to be stored on site. It's called permanent storage. But supposedly they'll be entombed in concrete so they can stop putting that radioactive dust into the atmosphere and on the ground and into the plants and animals and people. This is expected to take 1 year, $13 million, and let's hope that they finally do manage to clean this up. Next story, Guardian, November 10th. China's CO2 emissions have been flat or falling for the past 18 months, analysis finds. So this is one where we can pause and say, yay, because we've been hoping for this. We've been waiting for this for a long time because China is the world's biggest CO2 emitter, but they've been putting up so much wind and solar that they've actually, even though their demand has increased, their emissions are flat or declining. And this is probably means that China has finally hit peak carbon, and that's well ahead of schedule. They weren't planning to do the peak carbon until 2030, so 6 years ahead of time. That's great. The amount of solar in the past year has gone up 46%. The amount of wind gone up 11%. So even though demand is increasing, as I said, emissions are flat or declining. Just in the January to September of this year, they added 240 gigawatts of solar, which is equivalent to about 240 nuclear power plants. So great news there coming from China. Next story, some more good news. This was an electrek.com, ELECTREK, on November 12th. The title is EV sales still have not fallen, cooled, slowed, or slumped. Media is lying to you. And the thrust of this article is for about the past 2 years, all the mainstream reporting on EV sales, electric vehicle sales, has been saying that talking about how the percentage of growth rates has declined. And, a couple of years ago, growth rates were about 50% per year. Now it's only about, quote unquote, only about 25%. But the reason for this decline in the percent of increase is that there's now thousands and thousands more cars. So you can't keep doubling. Back when they were increasing by like 50% a year, there were only a few thousand EVs on the road. Now there's literally millions, and you can't literally keep doubling things every year. Remember the old story about the chessboard, the guy who asked for a grain of rice, like put 1 on the first square, then double it to 2, and then put 4 on the next squares, and keep doubling it all 64 squares of the chessboard. And by the time you get to the last squares, there's not enough rice on the planet to do that final thing, because you just literally physically, mathematically can't keep doubling. So the growth is still increasing, and it's very healthy. In 2021, 2020 to 21, it doubled, but of course it can't keep doing that. But right now, Norway has, this past year, 98.3% of vehicle sales were EVs, even though that's only an increase of 14.6%, but that's up from 96.4%. So they're almost to 100%. So they can't keep doubling their EV sales, because that would be doubling their sales of all their cars. So the first 10 months of 2025, real EV sales have increased by 23%. That's 32% in the EU, 22% in China, and 48% the rest of the world. Now, the other thing that this article points out is that there's real decline in internal combustion engine cars, ICE cars. Apparently, they peaked in 2017. And we don't hear about this, but they've been declining very steadily since 2017. They were 80 million at that time, and now they're down to 60 million. And the projections are they're going to, go down even more, even faster in the next couple of years.
Oh, by the way, I had an alert listener point out to me that I probably should have mentioned last week during the Cuyahoga Valley National Park segment that they also have the Cuyahoga Valley Scenic Railroad, which I checked one time, and it's still going in the winter, and you can go on beautiful Christmas snow tours through the park on a train, looking at the scenery.
Well, cool. Well, thanks for that.
I would like to do that. Actually.
That little update. Yeah, me too. That sounds fun. Maybe we'll do that. And do a live report or something.
There we go. All right, we're on a train and there's snow.
Okay, next story. Got some good news here. Our nemesis Holtec, the evil Holtec Corporation.
Oh, not again.
Well, no, this is good.
Okay.
Story in the Plymouth Independent on November 9th. They've been trying to get permission to dump 800,000 gallons of radioactive water into Cape Cod Bay. And the title of this story was Holtec appears unlikely to win appeal of radioactive water ruling.
Good.
Yes. So Cape Cod Bay is protected by a law called the Open Sanctuaries Act, which basically prohibits all industrial waste dumping into Cape Cod Bay. And so the regulatory bodies there in Massachusetts have said no.
Good.
You just can't do it.
And my cousin has a vacation home. I guess it's been in the family for a couple generations on Cape Cod.
Oh, good.
I would hate to think that they're all getting irradiated.
Well, unfortunately, what Holtec is now doing instead is they're evaporating the water instead of dumping it into the bay. They're putting it into the air.
Okay.
And they're saying that
that couldn't possibly go wrong.
Right. And of course, that actually is not good because inhaling radioactive tritium, the radioactive isotope of hydrogen that's in tritium into your lungs is actually, since it's an alpha emitter, it's actually more dangerous than drinking it and drinking water. So.
Wow.
So they are evil, and they're still continuing their evil, but at least we managed to, to thwart one of their evil plans. All right, last story, and this is an invasive species story coming out of Michigan, our neighbors to the north there. WILX in Lansing, Michigan on November 13th. Ready for this? Invasive jumping worms.
No!
Damage Michigan
I'm not ready for
ecosystem.
this.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. These are
Not ready at all.
earthworms that can literally jump up to a foot in the air. And yeah, people describe it as being kind of nightmarish. People who are.
I feel like that might not be a fun surprise.
Yeah, like people whose gardens got invaded and they're down there like weeding and stuff, and all of a sudden worms start jumping all over them. Yeah, it's not good. Yeah, they're very damaging to the ecosystems because
I don't want to share my personal space with worms.
No, don't have in your hair or anything. Yeah, they're damaging because they disturb plant roots, and they also eat leaf litter. And normal earthworms eat leaf litter, right? But then when they excrete, when they do their worm droppings, they do that mostly under the ground. And so the nutrients in the leaves get recycled back in.
Right.
These worms stay up on top of the ground.
Oh.
And so then when it rains or there's any precipitation, all those wonderful nutrients just wash off into streams.
Oh.
And they make the soil less and less fertile. And apparently, if a place has had them for a while, what you get is this like gravel-like sterilized kind of soil.
Lovely.
Yeah.
Just what we need.
And so they were already been found in Detroit, Grand Rapids, Michigan. It's a complete failure of the government. It's a repeat of the Emerald Ash Borer because the state of Michigan should be doing literally everything they can to contain and eliminate them now. while it's still just in a part of one state instead of letting them spread all over the country like they did the Emerald Ash Borer. So let's hope they get on the ball. We're going to contact them. That's it. That's it for this show. Thank you so much for listening, folks. Joe DeMar.
And Rebecca Wood.
Signing off. All right, folks. Sorry about the live stream not starting up right away. YouTube threw me some curveballs that I had to click around, but we'll have this all figured out and all nice and smooth for next week's show. So thanks for listening. It's Joe DeMar again.
And Rebecca Wood again.
Signing off again.